Tyler Shough is the future quarterback for the New Orleans Saints, then it is imperative the Saints put the weapons around him he needs. Today, we're back in the film room to answer the question of the 2026 offseason. Do we have the pass catchers to make this offense elite? So we're going to break down the wide receiver room, the tight end situation, and the one specific skill set the Saints found late in the season from a wide receiver that is now a free agent. Today, we talk about what the Saints have and what the Saints need. I'm Tim. Let's talk Saints. So before we jump in and breaking it down, and we're going to start with wide receiver one and wide receiver two, but something need to mention that as we go through this, looking at especially the wide receiver room, but looking at both rooms, only got a handful of guys left on the roster with what I'm going to call meaningful snaps, multiple games with multiple snaps that are still on the roster. But we will talk about some of the other ones at the end of the video. So that leaves you with talking about really four wide receivers left on the roster. And like I mentioned, that fifth one that's now a free agent, that is a skill set we need to bring back. And of course, Juwan Johnson at tight end. The other thing is, I'm going to talk a lot about complementary skill sets, complementary, not only in the wide receiver room or the tight end room, but also the way they work together, correct? So what I mean by that is, the simplest way to put it, when we started the season in 2025, our 1, 2, 3 receivers were just, for lack of a better word, very homogenous. They were all kind of some degree of the skill set of the same guy. So Olave, Cooks, and Shaheed are kind of fighting in the same area to get open and catch balls, intermediate, deep. That's where they operate. That's where they're really good. Kind of makes me wonder if that doesn't make it a little easier for the defense to defend you, because I mean, their top three options coming out from the outside or even from the slot position as a receiver, they're all very similar skill set. We're all going to basically defend them the same way. They don't bring a whole lot of diversification outside of what they do well. And all three of them are out there doing it. That's how we're designing our defense to stop this offense. I think Kellen Moore came in a little late in the game when we hired him, but the free agent process had already started. Cooks had been brought in some of the moves we could have potentially made. I think as the season went on, a little more influence of what they were trying to do in the offense and the way the season was turning out made sense. Make the trade for Shaheed, let Cooks move on to a team that could better use him, because what we needed to do was add some of these other areas. And I think once we did, that was another big part of why you were seeing a turnaround in the passing game beyond even what Tyler Shough was bringing to it. The other thing is, these guys, had they started and operated the whole season, and I'm thinking of Vele specifically, but even some of those younger receivers that were forced into action later on, been here the whole year and operating in those complementary roles, whether skill sets or, while similar in some areas, are very diverse in others, and the way you can design an offense and mesh them together. And that's what really excites me about this offseason is now we're building a complete pass catching unit in the wide receiver room and a little work in the tight end room, but I think we've got some personnel there that can do it. So to me, what you saw at the very end of the season, yeah, everybody, well, the record's this and blah, blah, blah. Fine. I don't care about that as much as I care about, I started seeing on the field a group of receivers. And sometimes it was the guys kind of way down on the roster that we were having to pull in an emergency situation, finding ways to get in that offense and contribute. And more importantly, the offense starting to evolve in a way where the quarterback can get the ball as designed by the offensive coordinator to complement their skill sets and let them use it. So let's give it a start with Chris Olave and Devaughn Vele. So Olave, look, established himself firmly as wide receiver one, especially as the runway was kind of clear for him to take off once Shaheed and Cooks moved on. Now, I think he really established himself as an alpha, as a type of game-breaking receiver, and using the skill set what he does best. But Chris Olave combines that explosive speed and quickness that he has with great downfield route running, and that's where he makes his big plays. It's 100 catches on the year, 100 out of 100 catches on the year, excuse me, with 151 targets, 1,163 yards and 9 touchdowns. Led the Saints in all four of those categories, but he's also putting up very good numbers in some other key areas. Drop rate only 3.8%, 12.3 yards average depth of target. So we're targeting him downfield. 11.6 yards per catch. He's catching the ball downfield. He caught 67% of his passes on third downs, and that translated to a 47% conversion rate. NFL teams would kill to convert at 47%. And that was out a total of 45 chances on third down. So, but to me, perhaps the stat I think that best illustrates the ability for him to get open downfield and put the offense in a position to throw him the ball and make big plays. 100 catches. On 51 of those catches, he had 3 yards or more separation from the nearest defender. That's some alpha type stuff there. I'm sorry. We talk about diverse skill sets, and there's some things, if you want him to catch the ball short and be explosive in yards after catch game, he's not your guy. That's not what he does. What he does is quickly get downfield, running good routes, and getting open so you can get him the ball in space, and then he can go from there. Which brings us to Devaughn Vele, wide receiver 2. To me, the perfect complement once we finally, again, cleared the runway and found the time to put him on the field and let him go do his thing. What is his thing? To me, he's a catch monster. So he's got good height, strong in the contact department. They don't really push him around and push him off of routes. And when you're talking about strength, he's got insanely strong hands, in my opinion. I've called him before like a pair of vice grips that he just latches on the ball and ain't going anywhere. And use that skill set. Again, diversifying skill set and finding ways to use it in your offense. Look, contested catch guy and a chain mover. Possession type receiver, if you want to use that moniker. I don't really care. That's what he does. Perfect complement to what Olave is doing downfield, drawing most of the coverage. Contested catch rate at number one on the team, 81.8%. Awesome. 0 drops, drop rate of 0%. His average depth of target, and this is one that caught me by surprise, 12.6. It's right up there with Olave. Third down conversion rate, and actually it's a little ahead of Olave's. Third down conversion rate, or catch rate, 78%. Third down conversion rate, 67%. You think 47% is good on a conversion rate. NFL teams would absolutely kill to hit 67%. So these are all team leading numbers that he had in his stats. Here's the thing. He became a starter in week 10. Okay. Week 15, kind of late in the game against Carolina, a season-ending injury that actually only ended his season because he wasn't going to have enough time to recover and get back on the field before week 18. It's by week 11 in there. So he played a total of 5 games, really 4 and some change going into that 5th game. In those games, that was 26 of his 36 targets, 20 of his 25 catches, 247 of his 293 yards, 1 of his 2 touchdowns on the year. So in that 5-game span, to me, that's where he really showed. That's roughly about a third of the season where he is that perfect complement. Possession guy and that explosive downfield guy, Vele and Olave, and pairing them up. And to me, they get you about 2/3 of the way to where you need to be for a complete receiving core. Now, here's where we're going to talk about the third one, and the guy that did it the best is no longer on the roster. So let's talk about yards after catch. Third thing, right now, currently, we don't have a real player that excelled at it. And quite honestly, it's been probably years since we had a player that really excelled at it. And by this, I'm not talking about what Alvin and some of the running backs can do after the backfield. I'm talking about what receivers can do, especially in the slot, especially when you design specifically real easy pitch and catches behind the line or at the line, expecting that guy to go make an explosive play downfield. You know who did it 2 big times this year? And the only really 2 big ones I can think of or find in film review was Dante Pettis. So he's a free agent, and he's actually going to be 31 when the 2026 season starts. So bringing him back is worth the conversation, I think, but I don't know if that's the route you're going to go. But he was brought back by the Saints in Week 12, mostly to replace Rashid Shaheed, who had just gotten traded as a primary punt returner. I mean, he was a veteran receiver and is going to give you some depth there. And as attrition happened in the wide receiver room, especially late in the year with injuries, he went from primary punt returner to primary punt returner, primary depth piece on the offense. Now, the only 2 weeks where it really caught up and he got a ton of action was week 17 and 18, because at that weeks 17 and 18, excuse me, because that's where we were really backed up at wide receiver and looking for bodies. But in those weeks, combined for 8 catches on 9 targets and 113 yards. 0% drop rate. So again, guy that you throw it to him, he catches it. 14.1 yards per catch. That's the team leading stat. 9.6 yards after the catch. Yak yardage. Not only did that lead the team, but if you were to ignore the minimum snap counts the NFL has and just go, give me every wide receiver in the league, and what was their average yak, their yards after catch? His 9.6 would have put him 8th overall in the league. So he contributed solidly too in those games with some downfield pass catching ability. So don't get me wrong, this is not the only thing he does. He has just done it at a level I have, again, not seen a Saints receiver do for quite a while. The 2 big plays that you got to talk about where he did it: Titans, a 32-yard catch and run that, geez, had it ended in a without the fumble inside the 5, we would be talking about that as one of the best plays, offense plays of 2025, quite honestly. And the Falcons, he took clearly designed quick pass out of the backfield, 22 yards on a catch and run. And what's important about this, these type of plays, throwing at or behind the line of scrimmage to receivers that you're expecting to go downfield and make a huge play. A lot of offenses, a lot of top offenses in the NFL, that's a staple. They go to it a lot. Green Bay comes to mind. If you watch them play and the way they operate their offense, they've got a couple guys that can do it. So what they're expecting is that yak guy that he's so good at, something easy dialed up that the defense is not really going to be able to defend at the point of attack, either by sacking the quarterback or getting to the receiver. And then he's using his explosive ability to pick up chunk yards, possibly even turn it into explosive plays, much like the big one that Pettis did against Titans. If you go back and look, the Saints have tried this a couple of times during the season with some of the other receivers and pass catchers we had. Nobody put up one play, much less 2, like Pettis did, in extreme limited amounts of opportunities we gave him over those last 2 weeks. So I think that's the third component that you need to add to that wide receiver room, and now you've got a complete complement. You've got the downfield guy, you've got the possession guy, and now you got the guy that can operate right at or behind the line of scrimmage and still throw daggers at the defense that they have to respect. So I don't know if the answer is bringing Pettis back or finding it in when we talk about the depth in one of the many other wide receivers that we're going to have in the room to start the offseason, or if you go looking for it in the draft, because guys like Skylar Bell is one name that pops up, but there's a couple of receivers in the draft. That's kind of what they did in college. So your options there to add this back in, they're pretty much exist at every level you can think about doing it. Um, I I think it's probably the only true need you really need to focus on this offseason in that receiver room is finding that yak guy and making sure he's incorporated into the offense. There's only 2 wide receivers left that are coming back with significant snaps in 2025. Kevin Austin Jr. and Mason Tipton. Now both are going to be going to their 3rd year with the organization in 2026. And Austin Jr. for the 2nd year in a row, 24, now in 25, or this past 25. Late in the year, pressed into service because the wide receiver room just got whittled down. And I think for the 2nd season in a row, he showed up and put up some pretty respectable numbers and showed some real potential. Only knock you have, or I have, or probably anybody has with Kevin Austin, really, what he contributed was this year he did have an 18.8% drop rate. Clean that up. And then what I think what you're looking at is overall a guy that, when pressed upon to come in, and this is not an easy thing to do, shows up and he can make some plays. I think he goes into this offseason as the 3-4 receiver, especially since those last two games, he kind of had to really grow into being, hey, because there's nobody left. I'm actually the number one receiver out here. And having to deal with a little bit of coverage and trying to make some plays, I think he did a pretty good job of it. So I think he walks in a real strong possibility of that 3-4 position, unless somebody on that roster, and there's a lot of them back there, are going to come in and have to take that spot from him. I think he can hold on to a spot if, again, cleans up the drops and continues to develop, and he gets his chance from the jump of going, yeah, you could be in the mix for one of the top 5 or 6 spots in this offense. The other player in this one, very similar and somewhat disappointing, is Mason Tipton. Now, we all know how explosive he is, how fast he is. Um, did a really good job once he got the kick return job for the Saints, and really worked in there. And if he could just catch his offensive production up to that, then you really, really have something there. But he's had opportunities now 2 years running, several times where they've really tried to incorporate him in the offense. It just hasn't translated, just hadn't realized that potential I think everybody thinks they see in him. But what's disappointing for me, I was really hoping this year, especially after Shaheed was traded, go, okay, Tipton is to blow the top off the defense guy. Got a quarterback that can sling it. Either one of them, Storton Rattler or Shough, get some opportunities to get him to open downfield and hit him with big plays over the top. And now you're really going to open this offense up. If you could put a second deep threat back on the field with Olave like that, it just never quite showed up. Hopefully it develops for his sake, because honestly, again, the untapped potential in that receiver room behind him, they may be coming for Shuck's job, but Tipton, I think, is by far the more vulnerable of the two right now. So I think this is a huge offseason for him where he's got to make that leap into that type of receiver. And because of his explosiveness and his speed, if he could add that yak component that we were just talking about to his game, and he slides into that spot and helps you there. So I think he's the guy with a lot of opportunity just based on his skill set, but it's got to develop. So he's either got to be that big threat downfield or that threat in the short game that can turn it into an explosive play downfield. So he's in a precarious situation, but overall, as a starting point out of that 5, I think obviously our top 2 are real good, or 4 rather. Top 2 are real good. A couple young guys who have been here for a couple of years that I think they can make the jump. They're going to stick and be those depth pieces. They can be able to help you in the offense and help you win games. So we need to talk about our one tight end with meaningful snaps on the roster. He's the only one that had over 80 remaining. The rest of them are all free agents, and we'll talk about that more in next segments. But Juwan Johnson this year in 2025 turned himself into a weapon, a tight end that really stresses defenses. Who knew? I didn't really think, I doubted his ability to do it. Honestly, sorry, Juwan. Um, I was one of the vocal ones that contract he got never should have got. Well, he at least earned the first year of it, and I was wrong on that too. Look, as that move tight end, he hit some breakout overall numbers that, again, I didn't think he was capable of doing, but he did it. So let's talk about it. The two that just blow me away. I mean, his catches, targets, yards, all that stuff was great. But when I started looking at his numbers and looked at 363 or 362 rather total yards after the catch, that led the team. Total yards, not an average. That was Pettis. He forced 12 missed tackles after the catch. He'd have been the last. Generally speaking, a tight end would be the last person I would think that would generate that. He did it. So Ball security, we have to talk about that with him, though. The one real drawback that, man, you clean this up, you're really a weapon. But drop rate of 8.3%, I'd like to see that down 5 or below, preferably. But the big thing, 2 fumbles lost. And remember when they happened, they were both kind of painful in games we ended up losing. So the real area, though, outside of his raw numbers, that he can stress defenses, and this is when I looked this up, just totally amazed me. But when you look at his receiving direction chart in the NFL, he's got no weak spot in any of the 12 zones. He's going to bring production in all of them, and he is a matchup issue because of that. And he'll also never draw full attention as long as you have that other receiving core that we just talked about kind of spread around him. And especially it's a diverse one that does a lot of the things that they do. So you're not going to see coverage necessarily roll to him unless there's no wide receivers left. Kind of what we saw in the Falcons game, last game of the year, where they were doing that to him. But even while the Falcons were doing that, it was opening up opportunities to the other wide receivers. So, or to the other receivers. So I don't think, you know, he'll ever be a true inline tight end that's going to line up next to the tackle and do some of the dirty work in there. Again, not his game, not necessarily a skill set. And so we're not going to ask him to do it. But as a move tight end, he really showed his potential. When he keeps hitting that, then you really have something in the pass catches. Now, the fact that he showed the ability to operate both inside and outside the hashes at every depth, that's how you're going to make plays and keep giving that tight end room real production. Because now, think about what we're talking about. You got the other components. Got the big play receiver that operates downfield really well. You got the big catch guy that ball gets near him, he's going to scoop it up. Especially if you put the guy coming out the backfield that's really going to stress defenses with his ability after the catch. You're opening up for a move tight end like this to be able to kind of roam the field, find some spots, and catch balls from a quarterback who understands offensive concepts, knows how to read and react and anticipate throws. So I don't think it's a coincidence, especially late in the year, the way Shough and Johnson really started finding a groove together in this offense. And like I said, I think that's a weapon that really, really stresses defenses. So heading into the 2026 offseason, the roster math gets interesting, especially in that tight end room. We'll start there because right now the cupboard's a little bare behind tight end one. Now we know Taysom Hill is reportedly hanging up the cleats, and you can never truly replace Taysom, but we must fill that void some kind of way. Juwan Johnson is the only tight end on the roster who played more than 80 snaps last year. He's our receiving threat, our move tight end. There's no question about that. But behind him, a lot of questions. You have Maliki Mataveo, Zaire Mitchell-Payton, Mason Pline, and Trayton Welch currently fill out the room. Now, but are they ready for a full season's workload at tight end? Can they handle it? Do they have the ability? We don't know yet. So the Saints have a decision to make. Do you trust your staff to turn one or two of those young guys into, especially an inline tight end and reliable blocker, that's also going to be a passing game complement? Or do you go to free agency? So I think we need to look at free agency and grab at least one tight end there, either re-signing Jack Stoll or Foster Moreau, or go and find another veteran of similar skill sets and veteran ability to add to the roster to be the inline guy, that tight end that's going to handle that spot. So not addressing the inline spot is going to be, if you don't do it, you're just going to put more pressure on an offensive line that, as we covered in the previous video, they don't need any more pressure put on them. Now we flip over to the wide receivers, and this is a room potentially stacked with potential. Only way you can really put it is we've got Olave and we've got Vele. Pretty good there. Tipton and Austin, only 2 returners with real meaningful snaps. Now you had some late season signees, 2 of them, Samori Toure and Ronnie Bell, who saw the field in week 18. Bell even made that sensational one-handed touchdown catch. So in addition to that, you got guys like Bub Means, Jalen Polk, and Trey Palmer that are all coming off IR, and they all have some varying degree of NFL experience already under their belt. So Top of that, Saints have added recently Elijah Cooks and Damian Alford to the group. So that is a very crowded room, which I think is a good problem to have. Because the only real hole, as we talked about, is Dante Pettis' newfound yak ability for the Saints. He's a free agent. He's turning 31. But man, I just keep looking and going, you need that type of explosiveness in the short passing game. And logically, we should have that somewhere already in that room that we've built with all those names that I just mentioned. So if it's in the current room, great. If not, then we've got to think hard about re-signing him or another veteran who has that ability. Or what are we looking like in the draft? Now, that gets interesting when it comes to both wide receiver and tight end, because with picks number 8, 42, and 73 overall, 3 in the top 100, Saints should have an opportunity to add either to the tight end room and or the wide receiver room if they want to go that route. They have a chance to add an elite prospect at either or both positions. But if you already have them somewhere on your roster, and again, logically makes me think you do, then those top 3 picks, well, if you stumble across an elite prospect at wide receiver, tight end at that point, well, now you're moving from having to draft for need, drafting for luxury. And to me, man, that would be the greatest spot to be in for our pass catchers that we're trying to put around Tyler Shough. So when you step back and look at the big picture, the pass catchers, to me, I, I don't even think this is an argument, really, is the strongest group we have on the offensive side of the ball currently around Tyler Shough. So this is feeling more like a reloading, more than a rebuilding effort like at the other positions, but still needing some tweaking improvements. But I don't think you have to go in there expecting or wanting wholesale changes in the wide receiver room or the tight end room. So you've got the alpha in Chris Olave. You have that kind of possession monster and chain mover in Devaughn Vele. You add that move tight end, it's mismatch problem that Juwan Johnson became in 2025. So you have a good core right there with those 3 players. 2 of them in one room, the third one in another. And you have plenty of options to develop and find needed depth from the younger players in both rooms. But really and truly add some after the catch in that short passing game, some explosiveness off a short pass that can go for big plays. And I think the most important of the 2 things we need is that reliable inline tight end option. So you have 2 rooms that are very stable for the next 2 seasons. You and possibly beyond. You address those kind of, like I said, tweak or adjustments you make at those 2 spots in those 2 rooms. But I want to hear from you, Who Dat Nation. I've got a question specifically for the GMs and in the comments. Let me know if the Saints can only add one, just one elite playmaker, whether it's draft or free agency in the passing game. Do you want to add that pure explosive yak kind of slot wide receiver to the group, or do you want to go in and add that dominant tight end that's going to bring you some elite run blocking and some pass catching skills to go with it and handle that inline tight end role? So let me know your option. A, that yak wide receiver. B, that inline tight end. Hopefully you're as hyped as I am for Tyler Shough and what this offense has the potential to be if we start, I should say, continue building it correctly in 2026. So excited about that. Man, smash that like button. That really, really helps the channel grow. Make sure you subscribe. This is part 2 of our Building the Offense around Tyler Shough series this offseason. So if you missed part 1, it's going to be on the end card. Just click on it, bring you to the video. And this is why you need to make sure you subscribe and have notification bells on, because coming up next, we're going to talk about the running back room. And trust me, there's a lot there to talk about. So till I see you next time, I'm Tim. Peace out and Who Dat.